Hey, thanks so much for joining me. I'm Father Greg Renazizi, pastor of St. Gerard Majella Parish in Port Jefferson Station, New York. So thanks very much for being with me on this little 15 minutes or so, Friday afternoons with Father Greg. This came as a result of some really positive feedback, for which I'm really grateful, about the series I did during Easter week as we unpacked that great and central mystery of our Christian faith, the resurrection of Jesus. I hope they were helpful for you. If you didn't get a chance to see them, if you just go to our website, they're all archived right there. You can watch them. And before I get into really what I want to talk about with you for a little while today is please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can do that right below by clicking on that link and that button there where it says subscribe. That really helps us because we need to have so many subscribers before we can start to live stream on YouTube itself. So thanks very much for doing that. A lot of you have been reaching out to us and asking how we're doing here at the parish. I'm very grateful for that. It means a great deal to all of us. The staff here are, generally speaking, our families are doing pretty well. Like many of you, we have our struggles here and there. We know of people, family and friends who have been affected by the pandemic to greater or lesser extents. I should also say that a number of you have asked about one particular member of our staff. Can you come here? Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Leo is doing just fine, okay? He misses you all desperately at church, but yeah, he's doing just fine. We're giving some extra treats these days, but he looks forward to seeing you all when we get back to normalcy, hopefully in the not-so-distant future. We've all been missing things in these days, whether it was a sports season, whether it was a wedding. Some people have had the very difficult missing of funerals of loved ones. These days have not been easy. It's been a loss for everyone to some extent. And one of the things that I have missed the most, no surprise, is gathering for you all, our parish family, each and every weekend for Mass, for Sunday Mass. Even Mass during the week, but especially at Sunday Mass. I love being a priest, and of course the Mass is the center of everything that I do and everything that I'm about. And one of the aspects, not the most important, but one of the aspects that I do miss a great deal about gathering for Mass on Sunday with you all is after Mass. After we impart the final blessing and give the dismissal and everyone starts to make their way out of the church, it's very often that I'll be standing there with Deacon Frank in the lobby and just chatting, just talking about things. And some of you will come up and tell me about some travels. You'll tell me about your family and friends. You'll tell me about people who need prayer, maybe yourself or someone who's going for surgery or for tests or whatever it might be. So I get to do a lot of interaction, as I like to call it. A lot of my business as a priest, as a pastor, is done after Mass. And I really regret that I'm not able to do that with you all. So that's really what spurred this idea of having some time with you. Because one of the things that sometimes will happen, in fact, very often will happen, is people will ask questions after Mass. Maybe they'll ask about something that I said in my homily, or maybe they'll ask about one of the prayers they heard, or something in one of the readings that stood out to them, and they need some clarification. They don't quite get it or understand it. And as best as I can in that brief amount of time, a few moments perhaps, I try my best to offer some semblance of an answer, but it's not always possible. So sometimes I tell people, shoot me an email or give me a call, and I'll try to explain it a little bit more. So the thought came to me, why not do that, well, not in person, but still do that in some form right now. So that's what I'm hoping to do over the course of the next few weeks, is just answer any questions people have about our Catholic faith, or things they've always wondered about, something they've heard in the Bible, or from the prayers of the church, or really whatever is on their mind and their heart. So I'm grateful for those who submitted questions. If you have some questions, again, right below this video in the link there, there's a link to a Google Doc that you can just simply fill out a question. We're going to keep them all anonymous, but if there's something that's been pressing on your mind or heart, please feel free to ask it, and I hope in the coming weeks I'll be able to address that question for you. So one of the first questions I received was not a surprising one at all. In fact, I got it from a number of people, and it won't be surprising, I think, to any of you. And that is, we find ourselves in the midst of all of this craziness. The way I've been describing it lately to friends is these are surreal days. They really are kind of crazy. I don't think any of us could have ever imagined we'd find ourselves in this sort of position. And people have asked that amid all this suffering, all this pain, how do we reconcile that with our God, who we say and believe is all loving, all knowing, all merciful, and yet we're dealing with such difficulty at this time? How do we deal with that? Well, first thing is, we're not alone in asking that. What I mean is, Christians up and down the centuries have asked the same question, because there's really never been a peaceful time in church history, much less in human history. The reason why is because we live in a broken world, and the world has been broken for a very long time. We know the story pretty well. In fact, we heard it the first Sunday of Lent a few months ago. Adam and Eve, our first parents, set by God in the Garden of Eden, paradise. They have everything they could imagine. And then, after being seduced by the serpent, they give in to that temptation to believe that somehow God is withholding something from them. And they reach out and they grab that apple, a symbol, really, of reaching for that which was not properly theirs. And thus, sin entered the world. And not just sin, but all the brokenness that you and I deal with. Stubbed toes and hurt feelings, estrangement, and yes, disease and discomforts of all kind. But what also happened in that moment was that God set in place the ultimate rescue operation. And you and I have just celebrated that in the resurrection, in Easter. So, back to the question though. Why does God still allow this to continue to exist? And this, we look to some of the great theologians and scholars of our tradition, many of whom will distinguish between God's active will and his permissive will, meaning those moments in time and space where God acts deliberately, clearly. He manifests himself, as he did, for example, in taking on our human nature in the Incarnation, or Christmas, as you and I would know it. But then God also allows certain things to happen. He does not give us disease or discord or estrangement or hurt feelings or any of that. But yet he allows those things to happen. Why? Well, we look to the cross. Because it's in the cross that we recognize that the sin, the brokenness, the estrangement, the difficulty, whatever it might be, does not have the final word. The cross always gives way to the resurrection. And somehow, some way, God, as we hear in the book of Revelation, God will make all things new. This world is not it. This world is not everything. This world will give way to something far beyond our wildest dreamings and imagination, to a place of perfect refreshment, light, and peace. Now that's not just some Pollyanna pat on the head, there, everything's going to be all right. That is our faith. Firmly rooted and grounded in Jesus Christ by the power of his cross and resurrection. St. Clement of Alexandria, one of the early leaders of the church, once remarked that the resurrection of Christ, Christ himself, has turned all our sunsets into dawns. That somehow, some way, God will make a way. So there's a brief answer to that first and probably most pressing question. Another person asked me about purgatory. They said, is this life purgatory or is it something else? Well, each Sunday when we stand after the homily, we profess the creed or statement of belief. What it is we say as Christians is central to our lives. And one of the things we say is, I believe in the communion of saints. What does that mean? Well, there are three levels to the communion of saints. There are those of us who are on this life now, who are called the church on earth, sometimes referred to as the church militant. That is, we are fighting, struggling day in and day out, trying to fight against evil and temptation and all those allurements of the world, trying to fight against those and resist those and keep our eyes focused on Christ. It's not easy. You and I have to deal with it every single day, and we need God's grace to do it. The second level, you might say, is the church purgative, or those in purgatory. That root word there comes from purgation, or purifying. That is the great gift God has given us to allow us a chance to be purified of all that is still imperfect within us when we die. Because the third level is heaven. Heaven, some of you have heard me say this before, heaven is not a really, 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 really good place. It is perfection. Absolute, 100% spotless perfection. If it wasn't, I don't think it'd be really worth fighting for day in and day out. So, heaven is perfection. Purgatory is that great school of love where we burn away all those imperfections by God's infinite love and mercy so that we can attain perfection and be with God forever. So this life now is not purgatory. It is the church on earth, the church struggling, fighting, day in and day out. And please God, after lives lived well, we will either go to heaven or have to make that state of being stop in purgatory. It's not a waiting room. It's not boring. It is a purgation, a purifying of all that still clings to us that is not 100% of God, so that we can attain the joys of being a saint in the halls of heaven. Another question I got, really funny one. Someone asked me, Father, in the midst of all these self-isolation and self-quarantining days and everything, people are sharing recipes and things that they like to make and all. Someone asked me, do I have a favorite quarantine meal that I like to make? Well, I do love to eat, no doubt about it. And as far as things I like to make, there's one thing I really am very, very good at making, and that is reservations. It's been really hard for me, actually, because I do love going out to eat. I do love going to meet friends for a meal or for a drink or just to catch up somewhere. So that's actually been quite trying on me personally because I love being around people. I'm not really great in the kitchen. I wouldn't lay claim to have any special recipe or anything. I make the basics like most people. I can do so pretty well, but really no big recipes. Someone else asked me about my love for the Yankees and why is that so? Yes, I am unabashedly a Yankee fan. However, I also am quick to say that does not mean that I'm a Met hater. I am not. I love the Mets. I have no problem with the Mets. I will root for the Mets in every circumstance save one, and that is a Subway Series. So I'm not a Met hater, but I am a diehard Yankee fan. Why? Well, like most guys, I imagine, because my dad is a huge Yankee fan, and that was just passed on to my brother and I from an early age. So we are a Yankee household. But again, we're not Met haters. Don't ask about the Red Sox. That's a whole nother video we'll do later on. But anyway, no, I'm a diehard Yankees fan. I've had the privilege of going to a lot of games in the past, especially when I was at Fordham University in college, only a few subway stops away from 161st Street at Yankee Stadium. So great memories being at Yankee games, especially with my family as well. Another person asked me, Father, I have a granddaughter, and for a whole bunch of reasons, she has not been baptized yet. So how do I encourage my kids, my daughter and my son-in-law, to baptize their child? Now, I don't know if this question was asked because in light of the coronavirus, we haven't been having the sacraments publicly like Mass or baptisms or weddings or obviously funerals. So I'm not sure if it's about that. In that case, we will have baptisms again soon, I hope very soon, in which case we'll pick up and start to baptize all those people who were waiting and all those babies whose parents were waiting. But if the question is a little bit more delicate as far as what do you do when a loved one is not having his or her child baptized? What can you do? Well, we can encourage. We can encourage with our gentle speech, with our example. But ultimately, it is a parent's obligation to raise a child in the life of faith. That is one of the principal and highest honors of our humanity, is that we are able to bring forth life and then to rear that life in all ways, and especially in the life of faith. So I realize for some it might be hard because they see their grandkids or nieces and nephews maybe not being brought to the font of baptism as quickly as they would like. I recognize that. But the truth is, parents have to make that decision. So I would encourage anyone to encourage those who find themselves in that situation. It also helps not so much to do the finger wagging of, you should do this, you need to do that. Most of us don't respond well to that. Think of advertisers on television, on commercials. Very often they're saying, I did this exercise program and I feel great. I tried this diet and boy, did it work. I bought this car or this computer or whatever the product is, and it made my life so much easier or happier. They use I statements. We call them, in Christian language, witness talks. They talk about how this thing changed their life. I think that's the best way to evangelize, to spread the faith, is to talk about what does my relationship with Jesus mean to me and how has it changed me for the better. People respond to that a lot better than you should do this, you should believe that. No one really likes it. But we do respond, and we often are intrigued by people who share something that has touched them in such a positive way. So I'd encourage people to reach out in gentleness, in compassion and mercy, and to use those powerful I statements about their belief and their relationship with Christ and His church. One final question. Someone asked, Father, is it true that when we pass away and when we get to that place of heaven, the highest form of the church, that we are rejoined with our loved ones? The short answer is yes. And not just that. St. Paul put it so beautifully in one of his many letters. He said, eye has not seen, ear has not heard, it is not so much as dawned on the mind of man what God has in store for those who love Him. That's a promise that God makes to each one of us, that if we remain true and faithful to Him in good times, and yes, in these challenging times, that if we persevere and hold fast to our confession of faith, it can make all the difference in the world, here and in the world to come. We'll have no comprehension of what lies ahead of us. We'll never understand it on this side of life. But our God, in His goodness, remains faithful to us always, even through the sleep of death, to the joys of heaven. So we hold on to our confession of faith, that Jesus Christ is Lord, that Jesus has risen from the dead, and that you and I share in the power and the glory of that resurrection. So thanks for spending a little bit of time with me on this Friday. Hope to continue this. So please, again, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Fill out that form if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Until then, know of my prayers for you and your loved ones. Stay safe, stay healthy. And even though we are separated physically, we remain united in our faith always. God bless you.